Welcome back to CIA Declassified. It is 2012. You are sitting in a high-end bistro in Brussels. Across from you is a high-ranking trade minister from a non-aligned nation, sipping an espresso and checking his shiny new iPad. To the world, this device is the pinnacle of consumer security, a walled garden that even the most talented hackers struggle to hack. But you know better. You are a CIA technical services officer, and you've been tracking this specific serial number since it left the factory in Shenzhen. You aren't worried about his password. You aren't worried about his encrypted apps. You don't need wide-vine decryption. You don't need Linux machines. You're not petty and incriminating yourself. You don't need eSIM toolkits locked onto people's phones who rejected you. You are looking at a device that has already been blessed by the agency's embedded development branch. Deep within the extensible firmware interface, or EFI, lives a tiny piece of code that the user will never see. It's a digital parasite that wakes up before the Apple logo even appears on the screen. It doesn't live on the hard drive. It lives in the silicon itself. Imagine the arrogance of the target. He thinks he's tech savvy. He thinks that if he suspects a compromise, he can just restore to factory settings and be safe. He thinks that by wiping the storage, he's killing the virus. But the virus is immortal. It's sitting in the dark matter of the computer, the firmware that manages the hardware. While he swipes through his emails, your implant is silently exfiltrating his GPS coordinates, his microphone feed, and of course his keystrokes. You've turned his status symbol into a bugging device that survives even the most thorough digital scrubbing. In this era of the mobile revolution, the agency realized that traditional malware was a disposable tool. They needed something permanent. They needed a way to ensure that once they owned a device, they owned it for the life of the hardware. This required a level of hardware sorcery that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. You're watching a man carry a spy in his pocket, a spy that is part of the machine's very DNA. The bistro is loud, the coffee is bitter, and the target is completely beautifully transparent. This is the cold reality of Project Dark Matter. It is the realization that in the 21st century, there is no such thing as a clean machine if the CIA has touched it. It is the pursuit of the persistence holy grail, a bug that simply will not die. While the tech world argues over encryption keys, the agency is busy rewriting the rules of the BIOS, ensuring that the sacks of shit who think they're secure are actually just walking beacons. Why the name? Project Dark Matter was named to reflect the nature of the target. In physics, dark matter is the invisible substance that makes up the vast majority of the universe's mass. You can't see it, but its gravitational pull governs everything. In the context of the CIA, the dark matter of a computer is the firmware. It is the invisible code that lies beneath the operating system. It is the mass that holds the hardware together. And by controlling it, the agency exerts an invisible gravity over every function of the device. It was a name that celebrated the power of the unseen. To understand the Immortal virus, we look at the declassified via leak logs of the firmware war. Project Dark Matter was a CIA program exposed in the 2017 WikiLeaks Vault 7 release. The project specifically targeted the firmware of Apple products, including MacBooks, iPhones, and of course, iPads. One of its core tools, Sonic Screwdriver, I have a whole episode on that one, allowed for code execution via a Thunderbolt to Ethernet adapter. The program focused on persistence, ensuring that malware survives an operating system reinstallation. Dark Sea Skies was an implant designed specifically for the MacBook Air. The project utilized EFI persistence to hide code in the boot process. Night Skies was an implant designed to be installed on factory fresh iPhones and iPads via supply chain interdiction. The CIA began developing these Apple-specific tools as early as 2008. Some implants were designed to beacon out to CIA servers whenever the device connected to the internet. Project Dark Matter utilized zero-day vulnerabilities in Apple's firmware security. The program included a tool called Triton designed to infect Mac OS automated systems. Implants could intercept and modify kernel-level data before the OS even loaded. The CIA maintained a library of exploits for different versions of the Apple extensible firmware interface. One tool, Medea, focused on exfiltrating data from the iPad via the sync process. The project targeted the System Management Controller, SMC, to control fan speeds and power settings. Dark Matter developers held regular sprint meetings to adapt to Apple's security updates. The program explored the use of acoustic exfiltration, sending data via high-frequency sound from the speakers. Project Dark Matter shared data with the NSA regarding firmware persistence. The CIA purchased exploit kits from private European cyber arms dealers to supplement the project. Some implants were designed to self-destruct if they detected a forensic analysis environment. The project investigated the possibility of infecting Apple's time capsule backup drives. Sonic Screwdriver could bypass the firmware password on a Mac. The program utilized code signing bypasses to make malicious firmware appear legitimate to the hardware. Project Dark Matter targeted the Thunderbolt controller specifically because it has direct memory access, DMA. The CIA maintained a secret Apple lab in Langley filled with every consumer model for testing. Some implants were capable of surviving a physical hard drive swap. You heard that right. The project utilized binary patching to modify existing Apple firmware files. Dark Sea Skies consisted of three components: Dark Matter, CP, and Night Skies. The program targeted the recovery partition of the Mac to reinstall malware after a wipe. Project Dark Matter involved the creation of custom drivers for the CIA's exfiltration servers. The CIA tracked the success of these implants across thousands of targets globally. Some tools were designed to work even if the user never logged into the device. The project explored visual exfiltration, using the keyboard backlight to blink out data in Morse code. Night Skies reached version 1.2 by 2008, showing a very early focus on the iPhone. The program utilized kernel extensions, KEXT, that were hidden from the activity monitor. Project Dark Matter influenced the way Apple designed its secure enclave in later models. One tool was designed to turn the iPad's microphone into a continuous listener for ambient conversations. The project used supply chain interdiction teams at major shipping hubs like Memphis. Dark Matter code was written in a mix of C, C++, and assembly. The program targeted the EFI variables to store persistence configuration data. Some implants could disable the Mac's camera's LED so the user wouldn't know they were being filmed. The project investigated side channel attacks targeting the processor's power consumption patterns. Dark Matter maintained a database of Apple's unique root certificates. The CIA recruited hardware hackers from the private sector specifically for this project. Some implants were designed to hop from a MacBook to an iPhone via the charging cable. The project analyzed the wear leveling of SSDs to hide data in reserved blocks. Sonic Screwdriver was a boot kit that executed before the kernel. The program targeted Apple's airport routers for network-level surveillance. One sub-project focused on firmware fingerprinting to identify specific users by their hardware quirks. Project Dark Matter represents the most documented case of state-sponsored firmware hacking. The project utilized heap overflow exploits in the EFI's image parsing code. The CIA used mock Apple stores to train agents on how to quickly swap a target's device for an infected one. Some implants were designed to remain dormant for months before activating. The project influenced the creation of the Cyborg Internal Review Board for cyber weapons. Project Dark Matter proved that air-gapped Macs could still be compromised via peripheral ports. Quote that is Declassified Internal CIA Technical Manual, Vault 7. Apple's iPhones and iPad persistence has been an elusive goal. Project Dark Matter represents the first successful persistent firmware implant for these devices. Declassified because it was leaked. CIA developer memo. If you control the EFI, you own the machine before the user even knows it's on. Declassified CIA project briefing. Night Skies provides a persistent covert presence on the device that survives even a full restore of the operating system. A leaked Vault 7 piece of documentation. The goal is to move the frontier of infection below the level of the hard drive and into the permanent hardware structures. Another leaked CIA internal presentation. We are targeting the dark matter of the system, the code that nobody looks at, but everyone relies on. Declassified CIA operational guide. Sonic screwdriver allows us to bypass the boot security of a locked map in seconds using a standard peripheral. And another leaked memo. This one's from the CIA Deputy Director for Science and Technology. The persistence of these implants is our greatest strategic advantage in long-term surveillance. End quote. While the Vault 7 leaks were extensive, there are still massive holes in our understanding. The heaviest redactions involve the section titled Collaborative Protocols with Domestic Silicon Valley Entities. We're talking about an estimated 421 pages of missing data. The government and the leakers themselves used Exemption B1 for national security and Exemption B4, which protects trade secrets and commercial information. This suggests that the redacted sections detail exactly which backdoors were provided voluntarily by tech companies. I speculate that these pages contain the master keys for Apple's older code signing certificates, and I further speculate that about 80 pages were redacted specifically to hide the fact that the CIA had a direct tap into the cloud-based firmware update servers themselves. And I'm not the only one with theories. In the world of dark matter, the line between feature and flaw is razor thin. For instance, there's the Apple-Langley handshake theory. It's a persistent one. It suggests that Apple intentionally left the Thunderbolt DMA access open specifically to allow the CIA to run Sonic Screwdriver without a fight. Then there's the silicon sleeper theory. Some theorists believe that every Apple device manufactured has a sleeper cell of CIA code built into the factory firmware, just waiting for a specific trigger packet over Wi-Fi. The iPad conspiracy speculation exists that there is a ghost iPad mode, a hidden secondary operating system that runs in parallel to the consumer OS dedicated entirely to surveillance. And then there's the Genius Bar ghost. A theory persists that Genius Bar technicians in major cities were secretly vetted assets who would install Project Dark Matter implants during routine screen repairs. Was it a success? Tactically, it was a firmware guillotine. Project Dark Matter was a devastating achievement in endpoint domination. It effectively ended the era where a user could trust their own hardware. By weaponizing the Thunderbolt port and the EFI, the CIA turned the physical security of a locked room into a joke. It allowed for fast-acting infiltration. An agent could infect a target's laptop in the time it took them to pee. The tactical use of supply chain interdiction meant the agency would win the war before it even started, delivering pre-broken devices to high-value targets. Furthermore, The tactical versatility of the implants, being able to turn on microphones, cameras, and GPS without any user interface indicators, made it the perfect tool for 24/7 surveillance. It proved that the walled garden of Apple was actually a glass house for the intelligence community. It forced the security world to move away from antivirus and toward hardware root of trust. But the CIA was already 3 steps ahead, having already compromised the root itself. It was a tactical triumph of persistence over disposability. Strategically, it was the end of the notion of a digital sanctuary. Project Dark Matter was about total lifecycle ownership. It shifted the strategic goal from infecting a user to owning a brand. If you can compromise the firmware of the most popular consumer devices, you have a strategic window into every boardroom, embassy, and bedroom in the world. It eroded the sovereignty of the individual over their own tools. It turned global tech giants into involuntary or voluntary partners in a planetary panopticon. The strategic fallout was a Cold War in the Silicon. It forced tech companies to treat their own firmware as a battleground, leading to the creation of secure boots and lockdown hardware that paradoxically made the devices harder for users to repair while remaining vulnerable to state-level actors. It proved that in the digital age, a factory reset is a lie. It established the CIA as the hidden administrator of the world's most elite hardware, ensuring that no matter how many times the drive was wiped, the Immortal virus remained the final authority. As far as technological and operational breakthroughs go, it had quite a few, such as EFI, persistent firmware implants. Project Dark Matter perfected the act of injecting code into the unified extensible firmware interface. This resulted in the ability to run malicious code before the operating system security checks ever began, creating a persistent infection that survived operating system wipes and hard drive replacements. This research has ironically led to much stronger hardware security for the general public. Modern computers now use secure boot and TPM chips to verify that the firmware hasn't been tampered with. It has forced the tech industry to treat firmware as a critical security layer, protecting the average users from low-level cyber criminals who try to use these CIA-pioneered techniques that are very old and dated at this point, almost 20 years old. The CIA is way farther ahead now. The military applies this and resilience systems. By using immutable firmware, they ensure that critical weapon systems and communication nodes cannot be disabled by enemy malware. It has created a fortified boot, a process for drones and field computers, making them nearly impossible to hijack at the firmware level. As far as spies, they utilize this for long-term access by maintaining implants in the firmware of foreign critical infrastructure like power grid controllers or satellite relays. They ensure that they have a permanent backdoor that remains open even if the target performs a standard security audit or a software update. DMA, Direct Memory Access Port Exploitation. The project identified that high-speed ports like Thunderbolt had direct memory access, meaning a peripheral could read and write to the system RAM without going through the CPU or the OS. This resulted in tools like Sonic Screwdriver, which could bypass passwords in seconds. This has led to the universal hardware sandboxing of peripheral ports. Modern Mac and PC operating systems now require user permission before a Thunderbolt device can access memory. It has revolutionized how we think about plug-and-play security, making the world safer from evil-made attacks in hotels or public spaces. The military uses this in fast forensic extraction. Special operations units use DMA-based tools to instantly pull the memory of a captured enemy laptop or smartphone before the auto-wipe triggers can engage. It allows for the rapid collection of battlefield intelligence from locked devices. Spies use this because it applies to their invisible infiltration by using active cables that look normal but have a DMA exploit chip inside. They can exfiltrate data from a target's computer simply by having them plug their phone into a charge. It turns every peripheral into a potential data pipe. Supply chain interdiction and preloading. Dark matter established the logistics of interdicting devices in transit from the factory to the customer. This resulted in the night skies model, where a device is infected from birth, ensuring the agency has access from the very first moment the user turns it on. This has fundamentally changed global logistics security. Companies now use tamper-evident packaging and digital signatures that verify a device's integrity from the factory to the front door. It has created a secure supply chain industry that protects everything from iPhones to industrial control sensors. The military uses this in verified procurement. The military uses trusted foundry programs to ensure that the microchips in their missiles and jets haven't been tampered with during manufacturing. It is a defense against hardware Trojans being built into the defense grid. Spies utilize this for strategic seeding by ensuring that infected tech is the only version available for purchase in a specific target region or for a specific target group, like an embassy's bulk buy. They can blanket an entire organization with surveillance before a single employee even starts their first day. And side channel and acoustic data exfiltration. To get data off air-gapped or highly secure Macs, the project pioneered the use of non-traditional signals, such as using the system's power consumption pulses or high-frequency sounds from the internal speakers that are inaudible to humans. This has led to the development of inaudible communication for consumer tech, like cross-device tracking, where your TV sends a silent signal to your phone to let advertisers know you're watching. It is also used in smart home setup processes where devices talk to each other via sound. The military uses this in low probability of intercept communications, LPI. Soldiers can use acoustic burst or thermal pulses to send short coded messages in environments where traditional radio signals would be immediately detected and jammed by the enemy. Spies apply this for gapping the air gap. They can exfiltrate stolen files from a computer that isn't connected to any network and never had been by simply having the computer's CPU sing a data-rich song via high-frequency heat or sound, which is then picked up by a nearby agent's smartphone. They just need to be within a 1-mile radius. Project Dark Matter was the day the walled garden fell. It was the realization that in the age of the algorithm, the hardware is the final judge. The Immortal virus proved that the most secure device in your hand is actually just the most efficient spy in your life. A digital ghost that doesn't care about your passwords, your wipes, or your factory resets. In the end, dark matter wasn't just about hacking a computer. It was about hacking our trust in the physical world. It taught us that the sacks of shit who think they can hide behind an iPad and an iPhone are really actually just carrying a Langley handshake in their pockets. Wink, wink. We look back at this project not as a series of bugs, but as the moment the CIA became the permanent hidden owner of the world's technology. As the iPad screen glows in the dark and the MacBook chime rings out, we are left to wonder, is your device really yours? Or is it just a lost boy from the agency's nursery, waiting to tell your secrets to the watchers in the mountains? The virus is immortal, the persistence is perfect, and the dark matter is all around us. If you want a secret to stay a secret, don't tell it to a machine that has a history. A factory reset is just a fresh coat of paint on a haunted house. Never trust a port that has direct access to your memory and a Thunderbolt logo. In the world of firmware, the person who writes the BIOS is the person who writes the future. If your iPhone is acting like a sack of shit, or your iPad, it might just be because it's busy talking to my friends in Virginia. And remember, the only truly clean device is the one that's still in the ground in 1,000 pieces. Thanks for listening, and join us next time as we're going to be examining Site R, also known as Raven Rock. It is the alternate joint communication center, the CIA's primary backup mountain for the end of the world. We'll look at the granite shields, the atomic-proof servers, and the secret tunnels where the agency plans to wait out the fire while the rest of us are left in the ash. Join us next time for the Doomsday Mountain. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.